want to say welcome again to Dr. J. Paul Hinds, right? What's going on?
Doing great.
We're glad to hear. I want to ask, right? There's a component that seems to keep men stable, keep them motivated, keep them healthy. It's called purpose. Why is it so important that man has a purpose?
Why is it important that men have a purpose? I think purpose is important to any person, regardless of gender or race. I mean, purpose has to do with a goal that you have in life, something that you can strive towards, something that also gives you a sense of meaning, which is very important. I think if you want to talk about the crisis of manhood and what's getting the most publicity today, it really has to do with the crisis of white manhood, especially young white men. Now, they're experiencing things today that black men have been dealing with for decades, which is, in some sense, a crisis of community and a crisis of meaning. A couple of economists from Princeton University wrote a book called Death of Despair. Deaths of Despair. Death. That's yeah. There's certain deaths that are occurring in our society that are due to despair. Now, they named three reasons or three contributing factors to these deaths, which are alcohol, drugs, and suicide, which white men are experiencing at a higher rate. Now, the authors argue that some of the primary causes of this are, one, the loss of a sense of community. Some things that contribute to that is that we don't work the jobs that we used to work, factory jobs, manufacturing jobs, where a person used to go and have a sense of identity that was attached to their jobs. That's one reason. Another factor is the lack of, the decline of religious institutions in our society are also giving a lot of young men a sense of despair, the loss of meaning. And also a loss of status also. Manhood is not as highly regarded in our society as it once was. So those are some contributing factors that are leading to these deaths of despair, are leading young men to do, again, the drugs, the alcohol, and the suicide, which are, again, it's tied to purpose. You don't have the jobs you used to have. Your religious affiliations are what they once were. The overall society doesn't really value manhood like it used to be. So, I mean, that sense of having status like men used to have, especially for white men now, again, this is what they're arguing for, is something that we're struggling with in our society. And then again, this is something that black men have struggled with for decades, but it's more pronounced amongst white men now.
Due to like social aid or just whatever, that white privilege that was there. I don't say was, but it's still there.
Yeah, to a certain extent.
There was a level of status that you maintain psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even though it was mythical to a certain extent, especially in regards to abilities.
The status you're talking about?
Status and your idea you have about yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's what has crumbled. I think this
in regards to white men?
I think this generation is more realistic in their inadequacies than previous generations.
And I think they have less self-esteem than the previous generation.
I think that's, even though the self-esteem was false,
mm-hmm.
right? And it was fueled by society. I think they have a more realistic view of their capabilities and their place in society, and I think that's what's crumbling them.
No, it could be. I mean, but you could say social media is playing a role in all that. The lack of self-esteem that especially teenagers have and young men have.
Because I think for younger white guys, it's much harder because they don't have the access to capital.
No, it's hard. Yeah.
And even also in regards to jobs, like with, I know, like there's still a distortion in regards to the amount of jobs and the demographics. But they're not it's not that high percentage of positions like they had previously.
Okay, so this is another thing that they're arguing, and which is very true, is the jobs. So the jobs they used to have, they can't get those jobs anymore. What the income that families make now, especially men make now, doesn't do what it used to do decades ago.
Can't work fight.
So say for instance, a man used to make $40,000 a year. And used to be able to, pay his bills, maybe put a little money aside in the bank, maybe help his children with college tuition, so on and so forth. That money isn't doing what it used to do because of inflation and other reasons. Men can't be the sole bread earner in the household anymore. That's another thing that diminishes status. Wives have to work and have to work a job that pays well if you want to live a certain kind of way.
But I think another thing that is very hurting the white male ego is the domination they had in the household because of economics. They don't have it anymore.
Well, that not only a household, but socially too. You can't go to church, or if they do go to church, and say, I'm taking the family vacation and I'm paying for it. You know what I'm saying? But that's the status too. A lot of it is very shallow and doesn't really speak to a person's character. But these are the kind of things that built up the male image in our society, which doesn't really exist that much anymore. And now, what has always been available to men, and what will always be available to men, no matter what their social status, no matter what their economic status, is violence. Right? A man can always be violent.
And he masters at that fire. That's
And,
my concern.
and this is across the board. You can always be violent, whether it's towards your spouse, whether it's towards your children, whether it's towards some political faction that you think is evil. And that's what a lot of men are turned towards now, which is being violent because nothing else is available. And that's a real dangerous part. And the lower that men get in a society in terms of their social status is oftentimes the more violent they become and the more they're attached to violent figures and violent ideologies. And that's what's really problematic in our society.
I want to touch on that violence
Yes.
you just spoke about in regards to the connection between economics, social status, and violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Though the black community, we have a violence issue, I believe the white man's violence will be more extreme.
Okay.
Because the thing is, black people have been suffering. It is what it is. We've been suffering for the longest.
Mm-hmm.
So despite there's violence, there's a coping mechanism built into black life because you grew up in a certain environment.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue I'm observing firsthand with white people, specifically white males, they don't have coping mechanisms for stress fire.
Mm-hmm.
Like they really fly off the handle when they really get that pressure. And that's like my biggest concern.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So, how are we defining violence? Because violence takes on various forms. You have physical violence, you have psychological violence, you have political violence, and all those
Violence towards themselves. And
violence towards
self-destruction.
themselves. It takes various forms.
That's what I've been seeing a lot, the self-destruction, like violence towards themselves, destroying themselves.
Yeah. But that, again, is the despair again. Because, again, the drinking, the drugs, of course, suicide is all self-harm, self-destruction. That's becoming more prevalent, too. But the other thing is, so it's the turn towards violence. And the other thing we have to consider is are there mechanisms in the society to kind of allay or kind of lessen this violence? And that's another thing that we really don't have in our society as well. Because for whatever reason, for whether good or bad, everybody's not going to pick up the phone and call the psychotherapist. Nobody's going to call, pick up the phone and call some kind of local clergy person and help them deal with their issues. What's in a society to help to make this violence or kind of lessen the effect of this violence? And we don't have those things in place as well either. This kind of gets to the wider social networks that we used to have to kind of keep people in check, to make people feel a sense of self-worth, to make people feel that they're valued. Family networks, kinship networks, other social networks. It goes back to the jobs again, the kind of friendships and social relationships that are formed on jobs are not available like they used to. For instance, if you're now, the gig economy is big now. So if you're doing deliveries or if you're driving for Uber, those kind of jobs, those are very isolating jobs. There's not a lot of social networks that you can form in these jobs. That's a lot of stuff that people are doing now just to pay the bills. So it's kind of, it's so ingrained in our society now, the isolation, the lack of community, that those are kind of things that used to keep people kind of tempered down and kind of cool the tensions that we feel now that aren't available anymore.
Is this just like the natural course of capitalism taking its course? Because capitalism really, it seems
a certain kind of capitalism.
It just seems because it's like it really promotes this individuality in regards to all you need is your material things, all you need is money, you don't need anyone else. And I think that's the ideology. But now it's even harder now because you have to work harder to survive. So you're even more isolated.
Well, I mean, is working harder to survive and what you're making isn't enough. So the jobs you have to do, how much you have to work, the fact that you're making this job, you're not going to meet the needs that you want to meet. You're not going to be, right now, simple things like you can't rent now in this country is exploding. The ability to buy a house now is almost impossible in certain locales. Paying for college tuition is impossible. Those days are
We
done.
on food. We not even getting.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just talking about like things that people used to do. You used to work hard. I work Monday to Friday. I work my 40 hours. Bills are going to get paid. Mortgage is going to get paid. We could take a little vacation this summer. Those days are done now if you're just working, right?
What does that mean for the long term of the country?
The long term is not good. It's not good at all. And that leads to, again, political instability, which we see now in this country greatly. Like the political parties that we have now. And of course, I'm not going to name names, but one side is branded as being more extreme in a lot of ways than the other, right? What's the attraction to that? Promises of returning the country to past glory, which can happen. But it does foment a hope that people have that maybe if I do believe in this person or what they're preaching or what they're telling me, things will go back to the good old days. And it's impossible. It can't go back for a lot of reasons. Economic reasons, number one. Those jobs, again, that used to provide a sense of comfort for people are not coming back. It's just an impossibility. And we're not even getting on. And this is going to take off topic a little bit, but some of these conversations we're having about the state of white men and the state of the country overall, there are larger issues that are going to affect us economically that many people don't talk about. For instance, well, some do, but they don't talk about enough, like the rise of AI, the current state of the environment, what that's going to do in terms of employment and migration, mass migration, technology, healthcare. I mean, the diseases that will come upon us soon due to all that's going on is going to completely destabilize a lot of things. And it's frightening, but those are the real serious conversations that we're not having. I mean, automation, for instance. You have people now in this country, small restaurants that are automating services where they don't need people anymore. Automated transportation that's starting to be tested in this country. What is that going to do to the economy? And that's not you're not turning back once that stuff gets implemented, unfortunately.
It seems like people are in denial about AI for some reason.
Because it's frightening. It's not a comfortable conversation.
We don't want to acknowledge, like, bro, this thing
no,
is
already. And this thing, it's advancing so fast. And you can see videos right now on YouTube of automated, like, humanoid robots. The motions that they're making, what they're able to do. And these are the early stages. What this stuff will look like in 5 and 10 years, we have no clue.
And you know what? The fuel behind it, though, is that profit, because it's just everything's tied up. Because as a person wants to increase his profits, he's going to lean more on AI.
Because more reliable.
And just to stay competitive in a particular industry.
And mass production and reliable, yes. But what does it do in terms of the common man who needs to work wherever to get a job? That is done, is over. And again, what we'll be doing in terms of the mass of people who won't be employable anymore, it's going to be a huge problem.
Is it realistic, like, because we hear all these things about apps and this and that, right? But is it realistic for more black boys to be exposed to an example of strong manhood? And what would that look like?
Yeah, I don't know. What kind of models do you want to uphold? There are a lot of black men that are upheld as models of what manhood should be. But if you read their biographies, you don't want to live like these men lived. And this is from your most esteemed preacher to business leaders to whoever. So what kind of model are we trying to uphold? We like somebody who has some kind of a basic sense of self-worth, has some sense of dignity, knows how to be caring towards others. But see, I think a lot of the problems we have with men, black men, is that they don't have a sense of basic trust. Now, this is very interesting. I'm going to say this to some of the people who watch it. You will oftentimes say, I love you, to a person far easier than you will ever say, I trust you. Love, for instance, you have a newborn baby. You love the baby. You can't trust the baby. That hasn't been earned yet. That sense of basic trust, what we struggle with throughout our development, is something that a lot of men don't have. It's something our society doesn't really foment. Because when you talk about trust, it's more than just trusting, say, the parents who raised you or the grandmother who raised you. It's trusting your entire environment. And when we talk about, will this environment be something that I could really grow in, that'll take care of me, that's something that we negotiate throughout all our lives. But if you don't have that basic trust, if it's not restored throughout your life and really nurtured, then it's hard to form any kind of intimate relationships later on. And even when we get older, that can also lead to despair as well. So I think if young black men were learned or grew up in environments where they could trust more, I think that really not completely cure or eliminate, but it'll really kind of curb a lot of the detrimental behaviors that we criticize so much. But but I'm gonna say this: it sounds easier said than done, but establishing that basic trust, I think, is the biggest challenge that young black men have.
And I want to add on to something you said. I want to hear what you think about this. But in regards to trust, I think the trust itself is the foundation before you get to that point. And I think a lot of brothers, men, haven't gotten to the point of trusting themselves because they haven't gotten in the habit of completing tasks.
No. But that trust comes before competency. What can I do? That trust comes before some kind of self-worth. I can accomplish a task. But it all comes from and this is established, by the way. If you read some developmental theories, this is established before you can even talk. I mean, this is pre-verbal. So the environment has a lot to do with this. And unfortunately, the environment, as you already noted, is not the healthiest for a lot of young black men. But it's something that can't. Now some later on get this through surrogate parental figures. Maybe they play sports and that environment helps them to establish it. But that sense of basic trust is something that I think will deal or help to kind of lessen some of those character issues that we think are so prevalent.
Do you think if we had a more stable families, we'll have a better relationship with trust?
No, but see, these are hard conversations because we say presence doesn't mean that somebody's being effective and being able to establish trust. You can have two parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, but that environment could still be toxic because it's not a trustful environment. So
is it just a theory in a sense?
In terms of what the stable family and what it does?
No, the trust vibe, because it's just like, I know we could always like argue more and more in regards to the possibilities within it, but it's like people are people, so as long as you're around people, there's a high probability something weird.
But that's what I'm saying. It's not something that you get it and it's there forever. It always has to be renegotiated, and that's really the challenge of it. And you have to be open to be trustful, and that's another part too. Some people have been so scarred, I can't trust anybody, and given the environment, you can't argue with that either. So it's not a theory, and I'm not saying it's something that a lot of us will attain. I think it's something we need to know that needs to be established or try to establish with young men, which is very hard.
That's one of the topics I want to touch on later, but it ties into this in regards to men missing out on experiencing love based on previous hurts. Like they turn off, like they really turn off. Because I know most brothers, what they do basically is this. It's like 1 foot out, 1 foot in to protect themselves.
It's very hard.
And it's just like they try to play this I don't care thing to protect themselves.
Yeah, but you have to do it for self-protection because it hurts when that trust is broken.
But the thing is, though, is like you miss out on the beauty
of course you do.
Of friendship, relationships, relationship with your children, relationship with your spouse. That's the issue with it.
Yeah.
You know?
No. But you do miss out a lot. But then again, you can't blame them because there've been some men who experienced extreme breaches of trust. Not only with family members or spouses, with themselves. I mean, this is really established. Can I trust myself to accomplish a task? Can I trust myself to be trustful?
That's what I was saying earlier. That's the foundation.
No. It is self. Yes.
Because it's like, I think that as a man, there's certain criteria I have for manhood, right? But one of them is that you build trust within yourself by completing tasks. Like when you don't complete stuff, bro, like a long-term goal, it really you question yourself and you project that questioning on others.
Definitely.
You didn't demonstrate to yourself that you can be trustworthy to your word.
But that also, so when you're talking about the trust that one needs to build within oneself, you can't separate that from the environment, and somebody needs to recognize that you're completing the task as well. All right?
Acknowledgement.
Yes, all of us need recognition. All right? I don't care who you are, how much, how self-contained you think you are. You need somebody to look at you and say, he can do a good job of what he's doing, or he's reliable. I can call on him to do some simple task. That's why, if you get somebody who's really broken down, and they do the simplest thing for you, and you tell them, man, that's a good job. Some of them will break down in tears over that. Right, and you think it's nothing.
But how much stories I told you about at the school where you basically tell a kid like, bro, man, great job.
The tears.
Because don't nobody tell them
they never heard it. There are people out there that don't think, they've never had somebody tell them you're good at something. Ever. childhood, and that's part of the competence and that development.
That's
So,
why the exploitation is so easy and so high too.
and that's where the trust comes in, right? So like you just said, for instance, you and I are, you all know people who have been in terrible relationships, male or female, whatever the case is, not appreciated, abused, and you sit there and think, what the hell? Why is this person in this relationship, right? Well, what is for some reason that person, no matter how abusive they are, they confirm something for that person that you don't, right? And this person has convinced them for some reason, right? I'm the only one, no matter how bad I treat you, right, who can recognize you for this thing, for good or for bad, right? So recognition is a very powerful thing. And you'll take it from anybody if you've been deprived of it, for good or for bad. So it could be very toxic. That's why it's good. And you know this already. You have children, you have young people you're working with. You have to tell them you're doing a good job at something. And the recognition, I see what you're doing. And it could be nonverbal. Just, I see you doing this thing and I affirm it. Because that's something that gets etched in the mind. And they build themselves off of that pattern, right? To the point where, and that also helps where, I know what healthy recognition is. I know what unhealthy recognition is. I know what recognition is when somebody's trying to exploit me. I know what recognition is when somebody's trying to build me up. And that's communal too. That's what I'm saying. You can have your own sense of self-worth and knowing that I can do this job well, but that is connected to how others have recognized you for doing this thing. So I think it's very important. And it's back to community too, all right? It's not just individual. It's also communal as well. And that's a necessary part of it.
There's a social aspect and economic aspect that seems to have led to the extinction of Big Mama and Grandpa. First, majority have to work. Right? That's just the reality of it. And because they have to work so much, they don't have time to be watching anybody. Right? The next thing is socially, though, there seems to be a new ideology about age. And the 50, 60, 70, where we were growing up, were kind of chill, like, you know, and they kind of, but the 60, 70 now is like they still out there running the streets.
Yeah.
They want to be seen, and they have these, like, I don't want to say childish insecurities, but almost like immature insecurities where they want a certain level of attention, and they don't have time for other things. Have you observed that?
No. Well, yeah, but see, it's like, what was the function of, or what was the function we thought of having these elders around, especially grandmothers? Because I mean, you know, some grandfathers were there, but they weren't as emotionally connected as we thought they should have been.
They used to kind of give certain little vibes still too, and hold the order, you know.
True.
And give little life
lessons, but not as much like the grandmothers were still the center. Part of it again is economic, as you said. People have to work much longer now than they ever did. Well into the 60s or 70s. Another part of it is I think parents just don't appreciate those kind of bonds like they used to, and they're not as necessary. Economically, people can pay for services now that grandparents used to give. The beauty of it, though, I think, if we're going to put this as a model that people should kind of not even strive for or really appreciate, is there was a black painter, Henry Osawa Tanner was his name, like early 19th century painter. He had a painting that I think people should really look at called the Banjo Lesson. It's really a painting, a portrait painting. I don't know if it was actually of grandfather and his grandson, but the grandfather just sitting there with the grandson on his lap, teaching him how to play the banjo. And I think that's kind of the model we have in mind of what we thought or what we hoped these grandparents were doing for their grandchildren. That they were passing on some kind of cultural wisdom, some kind of lesson, some kind of wisdom onto the grandchildren. And I think for some of us who had the benefit of having grandparents around, I don't think, for us at least, our grandparents really sit down and say, you know, it's informal. The conversations you learn about cultural history, you learn about the past informally. I think a lot of that has been lost. But that is tied to our lack of appreciation for history generally in the African American community, which I think is very problematic.
Two things I want to touch on, right? One, it was a gentleman I spoke to, Italian brethren, and we were talking about cooking, and he was saying that in the American Italian culture, they're losing the recipes, bro, because these kids aren't
They don't want to cook.
They don't want to cook.
Yeah.
And there's a disconnect between them and the grandparents, and that's a big part of their.
Well,
culture.
let me tell you. All right, so it's not they don't want to cook, but they don't want to eat that stuff either. That's the other part. Yeah.
Right. I see it in the Black American culture. I see it in the Caribbean culture, and since food is such a vehicle to unite people,
was the center of communities.
Yeah, that's pretty disturbing now because you can't pay to cater.
No.
And just the cooking and interaction.
They'd say, there we go, right? The conversations that were had, where did this item come from? Or where did this originate? How, what about this technique? Not even the technique they would call it, but how do you do this? The stories that were taught, that were given about where
interaction from being in the present.
Grandmothers learned the recipe from, or where this originated from. All that stuff is really lost. But again, unfortunately, it comes back to the same thing, the speed of our society. Am I going to sit here and spend 3 hours cooking all day? For what? For 5, 6 people? I'm not going to do that. I don't have time for that. The appreciation for the cuisine itself. And this is a phenomenon that's going on all over the world in terms of cultural knowledge, cultural wisdom not being passed on to the next generation. Not because you don't have somebody to pass it on. It's because the younger generation doesn't see the value of learning the techniques, but also hearing those stories anymore, because it doesn't make money for many of us. It can't
monetize.
Can't be monetized, and everything in our society, as you well know, in order to be deemed a success, has to be monetized. So people don't see the value of it anymore. That's the biggest problem.
And there's another aspect of this grandparent thing I want to bring up is that I think people have a distortion about what a parent should be based on TV, especially our generation, because we grew up on TV.
Yeah, well, now social media is taking that place, which is way worse.
They have a real distortion of like what a grandparent's supposed to be.
Yeah, okay.
And I think TV shows played a big role in people's idea of what a grandparent should be.
Well, I mean, those TV shows got that, like I remember the Huxtables, the Cosby Show, the old grandfather who always had a story, all that kind of stuff. There's some truth to that as well. But again, there's a lot of reasons why that kind of model isn't really functional anymore. And again, I think a big reason is not because those persons aren't around, it's because younger people don't desire those kind of stories. And they're not kind of forced to have to deal with that too. Like I think previous generations, you had to go to family functions, or you had to listen to what the grandparents said because you were around them all day. You didn't have a choice. Things are different now in terms of
respect for them due to the time you were around them also.
And very basic things like we didn't have a cell phone on us to distract us constantly. Little things like that kind of destroying the dynamics that used to exist. It's causing a big problem too. And one of the things that I think is problematic is that these older persons don't feel appreciated anymore.
So they just cut themselves off.
Well, they cut themselves off because nobody's trying to learn what I know. Nobody wants to hear my stories. People don't want me around, or simple things again. If I come around the grandchildren, they're playing video games the whole time. They're in front of the phone the whole time because we really don't know how to interact with one another like we used to. So it's extremely problematic, and that's why people again go into their own little silos and are isolated oftentimes.
For those unaware, can you talk about the historical importance of the Black church in the spiritual, psychological, economic fabric of the Black community?
Yes. Look, if there was no Black church, you would not have Black people here. Period. It was a one safe space that the African American community had, or the Black community had, during slavery and after slavery. It has always has problems. There's always been issues with Black leadership and Black clergy persons. There's always been issues in terms of denominations and factionalism. There's always been issues in terms of power dynamics between leadership and congregations. Those things have always existed, but its function was always, and it's very basic, to keep the Black community alive. And it also serves a function in keeping the Black community tied to its African heritage. Now, there are a lot of things that happen in the Black church, a lot of practices that we laugh at. We laughed at as children, the emotionalism of the Black church, or the physical movements of the Black church, all these things that we took for granted when we were younger, which are really African retentive practices that they didn't even know that they were doing. The ring shout, for instance, in the Black church, that everybody thought was, what the heck is this? But these are traditional religious practices that, again, many people in the church didn't even know that they were where they came from, but they still practice these things. The music, Even the preaching itself is something that was retained from African religious practices. And I think one of the things that if people are really honest about the black church, and we're really afforded a lot of us who grew up in certain communities, especially poorer communities, that was the one place where recognition was given for accomplishments when you weren't recognized anywhere else.
I wanted to continue. I want to really delve.
Yeah. Well, I think you're about to go into the music thing. If you're talking about the music.
Before we get to the music, I want to talk about that recognition and just having like self-worth.
No. That was a huge part. Yeah, I mean, you had persons who had nothing else but they would usher. They had nothing else but they sang in the choir. They had nothing else but they served on the deacon board. Had no sense of authority nowhere else in their community. Not on their jobs, not in some kind of other social organizations, but the black church gave them that. And that saved lives for a lot of people.
I think it was very empowering to the psyche and the spirit to have that in an environment where you're literally seen as nothing.
Literally seen as nothing, nowhere else. Sometimes even in your own home, if we're talking about black women.
Facts. And
they held some place of prestige and authority. And had a sense of recognition in the black church.
So that was tell by how they took it seriously.
I'm telling you, no, it's true. You know? But also economically, the black church was a space where people could go and get financial help if they had run out of means. Social connections were also available. Politically, there's this stigma that the black church doesn't get involved in politics, but if you read the history, it was extremely involved.
Examples of manhood.
All that kind of stuff came from the black church. So, I mean, it doesn't hold the prestige it used to hold even, a few years ago. Things have changed in a lot of regards, and that's the church overall. But if you turn in terms of its social importance, you can't understate it. It is the black community's most important social institution even today.
And I think, man, this is just my theory. Please share your views. But I see a decline in music with the decline quality of music with the decline of the church.
Yeah,
that was the hub and the breeding ground and the practicing area for everyone who went into the carnal, what do we call it, worldly?
Well, yeah, secular, yeah.
Secular music space. I don't think people understand that. But I want to talk about there's one more thing I want to talk about too, is that I know it went on before, but this generation is not here for it in regards to that transfer of power. Like, there's always been an issue with the older leaders giving their power away to the younger leaders.
Oh, it's just that,
but this younger generation not here for it. Fire. They like leaving ASAP. And I think that's one of the biggest issues the church ran into. But moving forward, is there anything the church could do to reclaim
that prestige?
Yeah.
No. The church overall in this country is in steep decline. All right, especially mainline denominations. I'm talking about.
I think. Continue, sorry.
Well, yeah. But that again is tied to all those social dynamics we kind of talked about already. I mean, the church is an institution. Mainline institutions are struggling mightily. They can't find clergy to fill leadership positions. Membership is down, and that's also in the black church. Now, I think the black church is still the most prominent in terms of how faithful black people are to the denominations they're a part of, but it's declining too. But getting back, I mean, I don't see that happening because it's declining in social institutions overall in this country. I don't see how you would get back to that.
You think it's just a thing where Christianity ran its course?
Christianity?
Yeah, in this country.
I think it's religion. I don't think it's Christianity. I think any kind of religious beliefs and what the void religion used to fill for people. Ritual, for instance, ritual that takes community. Again, it's all tied to things we talked about already. People just don't have the patience or the desire to be a part of those things like they used to.
So, all right, we have religion.
This paint a very, very dark picture of what's going on, but it's just the reality of the situation.
We call this man Dr. Doom, bro. You have religion and spirituality, right? So do you believe people's connection to spirituality?
No, but see that's the irony of all this. People want spiritual connections, but they don't want religion. Right. You have people out there doing all sorts of things, taking retreats, taking on mushrooms, and doing all sorts of crazy things that have some kind of spiritual experience, but it's not tied to traditional religions. So that's the irony.
And I have a. Did I ever tell you about that book, God Is Red? I'd have to tell you.
Yeah.
So after I read that book 2014. I probably read that book over a decade ago, and it really blew my mind because the concept was how religion can't transfer, right? Mm-hmm. And because the main religions we have were really maintained and introduced through violence, it seems like it ran its course because it's something about it that's not touching the inner person.
Religion?
Yeah.
It could, I mean, it could be. It's
So
optional.
I just think sometimes, like, are these things supposed to be transferred, or are they supposed to stay in
What do you mean transfer one generation to the next?
one location?
Oh, okay.
To
See,
the
okay.
next.
Oh, I see what you're
Like
saying.
the space that they had that revelation. in
Yeah,
at
yeah, no,
that
that's
time,
interesting.
It should like just stay there because
But that's
when you try to transfer it, it doesn't touch the person. Or
well,
the group of people.
that goes to how a spiritual leader starts a organization, how the organization grows, how it becomes an institution, then becomes a bureaucracy, and that causes a bunch of problems. So yes, in that regard, it's problematic. But in terms of religion, I mean, it's just a problem that we have with organizations overall. Like, what are the prominent civil rights organizations we have right now? It's hard to figure. They don't last. One will rise for a couple of years and then they decline. I mean, it's just hard to think of institutions that are really thriving in our environment today. I think that's really part of the problem.
Explain your understanding of the Antichrist and why it's kind of a futile pursuit. People keep looking for this Antichrist.
For the person.
Yeah, for
All
the
right.
person.
First of all, we've had some horrible figures throughout history.
Wicked human.
To where if the Antichrist ever existed, they would have to be this Antichrist. All right. So my way of thinking about this is like this. All right. And again, this is a small book I read years ago by Friedrich Nietzsche on the Antichrist. The Antichrist to me is not a person. It's the way of life. It's an activity. If you are, and this is really towards persons who self-identify as Christians. If you are living your life in such a way that is completely at variance with the way Christ lived, right? And I'm talking about the way that you believe Christ lived in terms of caring for those who are oppressed, spending his time around the outcasts of society, giving of himself to the point of self-sacrifice, living a life according to love and understanding, so on and so forth. All right, this is not doctrine. This is not a person should avoid this, avoid that. We're just talking about living a life of love and caring for others, the despised of a community or society. That's the way I see it. If you're not living your life according to that way, in a way that's at variance with that, that to me is the Antichrist. And that's what some people identify as the Antichrist. Not living your life according to the way that Jesus lived. It's not a particular person. Now, to me, what that does for me is that there are most of us, if not all of us, have a little bit of Antichrist in all of us. And that to me creates a sense of humility to where I'm not in such a rush to identify somebody as an Antichrist when you realize you yourself are not living your life according to the way that Jesus lived. So I think in terms of the rush to say that some political figure is the Antichrist or some entertainer is the Antichrist, that to me is I think you use the word futile. I think that's misdirected. I think more of our attention needs to be paid to the activities that we exhibit on a daily basis. If those match the life that Christ lived, to me, I think is a much more fruitful path in terms of talking about what the Antichrist is.
For the brothers listening, right? Can you speak about the difficulties and overcoming the difficulties of raising black boys in the 21st century America?
Yeah, look, some of this, I'm going to use a word that people don't like, some of this is luck. A lot of this doesn't have to do with how much time you spend or how much you pour into them. Some things are just luck. I mean, you have to be fortunate to have children that are relatively healthy. You have to have children who are, for whatever reason, really honor who you are as a parent, as a father. You have to learn from the mistakes that your father made or grandparents made or the moms that you had. You have to be very self-forgiving because you make a lot of mistakes with parenting, especially young black boys. You have to be willing to also to ask for forgiveness when you've done things that are wrong. But at the end of the day, I think there are certain things that you need to do that can't be avoided. Number one, you have to be present. You can't, and when I mean present, I don't mean you need to be around them 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. But But when you're there, you need to be there.
Quality time.
You need to be there. And by quality, again, I don't mean duration. I mean, if I'm here
Presence,
5
like,
minutes,
yeah.
I'm 5 minutes, you're going to know I'm here for 5 minutes. And I'm not talking about face-to-face interaction, but they know your presence. They know your voice. They know when you're playing. They know when you're serious. They know that you care. And going back to something that we talked about earlier, and this is something that I think my children have the advantage of, thankfully, and I worked very hard on this, that you can be trusted. That if you're going to do something, you're going to do it. I think that's very good. Now, again, luck plays a role because I think the quality of your marriage has a big role to play in it. If you are married, I think also your own sense of self-worth has an effect on your children's sense of self-worth. If you're insecure, if you feel like you haven't accomplished anything, if your own life is very unstable, you will pass that on to your children in a lot of ways. How you model your life on a daily basis, again, is something that your children emulate, because I think there's something that I noticed in my first son that he still does to this day. I think I want to get your thoughts on this maybe when the interview is over. That I'm talking young, like a month old, very long. The stare that they sit and watch everything that you do. Your gestures, your tone, they look at you nonstop, and it's not going to stop, right? And they're taking all this in, and they're kind of patterning their own behaviors, their own way that they interact with the world, how you talk to other people, right? Now, I'm not talking about your spouse now, but why you go to the store, how do you talk to the person who's working at the register? Are they seeing a difficult situation, right? Are you going to snap and get loud? I mean, how do you handle that? Sometimes you need to. All right. When do you assert yourself? When do you step back and say, I can let this thing go? All these things that they're watching, all these things they're modeling after. And also something that you mentioned earlier, I think that's very important. How to complete a task, how to work hard. There's a time for that where I have to sit down, get something done. There's a time where I can be enjoy some leisure and be laid back. All these things I think are very important, but again, that's the presence that I'm talking about. I think that is something that a lot of young black men are fortunate enough to have. And again, I could sit here and think like I worked hard at it and all. Luck played a great role in a lot of these things too. But the benefits of it.
You think luck is the word? I don't know if luck.
I don't know better because I don't want to say because I've been blessed or because I just worked hard. There's a lot of people that work hard and they still hit against that wall all the time and don't know how to overcome it.
But it's like, I don't know, it's like how you quantify, I guess, success or things working out. That's the thing, is just like...
Okay, so can I just clarify some terms? Okay, I don't want to mix success with trying to be excellent or doing something well. Because, I mean, there are a lot of people we know that make a lot of money successful, but they're incompetent in a lot of ways. But I'm just thinking about being proficient, doing something well, completing a task, having a reputation for doing something well, because again, you can try to build yourself as much as you can up in your own home, but if your name is not thought of well outside the home, that's a problem too. So again, you do have to work hard at these things.
I just can't. We gotta use another word than
luck.
Bro. Yeah, we can't use luck.
All right. So what's the problem with luck in terms of?
Yeah, luck is just so like
it just happened.
So random in a sense.
Yeah, but some of this stuff is random too, you know.
To a certain extent,
yes.
It has to be something.
It's not. Well, okay. Well, I would say there's some. I don't know what percentage I would put on it. Some percentage of it has to do with luck, because you still do have to be committed and hard work and all those kind of things. But luck, some things I know I've had happen to me for good or for bad. Well, I would say for good if we're talking about luck. That fortunate, I guess I would say. Have the good fortune of some things happen. If luck is too
fortune
seems too random.
Yeah, too random alignment. Because I think too many times when we talk about certain things, we just focus on like what we would consider good. I've been going through this whole thing, what we consider like working out and good, or the blessing, as my Christian brothers would say.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can't use that word until 5-10 years later.
In terms of what, fortune?
Saying what's good or what worked out for you. You fit?
Yeah.
You're looking for a job, right? You're really looking for a job. You get the job. You say, man, it's the best thing ever. I needed the job. But 3-5 years later, it's the worst. You get what I'm saying? So I think we have to like, these words have to be more reflective, and you need time and space to actually analyze these things before we can say like it's like good or bad or blessed type of vibe, you know?
Yeah. But I'm just talking about the events themselves sometimes that come out of nowhere to me. I myself know how some people just deal with so much misfortune constantly. Struggle with the whole idea of just saying, well, I was fortunate or blessed for some things to happen. It's so random. Some of it was like that has to be some kind of just lucky happenstance event.
All right. Back to the young brothers now, right? Is there anything else you think men should focus on?
Men who are trying to raise young men?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I think the completion thing, I know you mentioned hard work. Hard work is cool, but I'm telling you, I've been observing this thing, and like a lot of people don't understand like how to complete a task, whether it's short term or long term.
But again,
specifically long term.
That's true too. But again, the resilience, I think, is another big word if you're talking about completing a task, because again, there's some people who hit so many walls when they're trying to do something. It's like, how many times can I keep trying? This thing is not going to work. So I mean, resilience is a very big part of it. But again, that's something that has to be modeled too as well, because I mean, resilience isn't something that just inborn. I think some people have to see it modeled. So I think that's very important too. But again, it's time too. Time as well.
Resilience is an actual thing for some people, bro.
Resilience?
Yeah, bro. I think it is. It helps because
how much resilience? I mean, all of us have resilience, but how much?
How much resilience? Because with the model aspect, like you have a lot of people who have a great model of resilience, but they're not resilient, and you have some who never see any resilience and they're resilient.
Yeah.
And then you have those who actually see resilience and for whatever reason they model it. But I think the resilience thing, I was reasoning with a brethren and we were talking about if resilience can be taught, and I don't think it sound away still, but I don't think so.
Okay, all right. Okay, so it's resilience towards what end?
How much resilience?
How much resilience towards what end? There are certain things, you can have the most resilient person in the world, but there are certain things they're not going to exert that effort towards. You got other people who don't seem laid back, don't work hard for nothing, but there's certain things that they will fight to the bitter end for. So that goes back to the passion thing. Like, what kind of passion elicits that kind of resilience to where somebody will endure to the very end to see this thing through? And that's what most people don't know, what they're supposed to be resilient for. So you can have the model, right? You're an athlete. Oh, I saw this guy training 8 hours a day and he never took a day off. That's great, but that's not your passion, so you won't be resilient about that. So let's find out what is your thing, your gift, your calling, whatever the case may be, to where, to the bitter end, to the death, to beyond death, I'm going to fight to get this task done.
I think that ties into the purpose.
No, it is. I mean, it's one's purpose. And that's hard to discern what that is. Because just because you're successful at something or making money at something doesn't really mean that's your purpose either. Facts. Or you're being recognized for it.
And I think a lot of men they have resilience, but in the wrong things.
Yeah, of course. For a lot of bad things that we know.
That's the why we need to tweak. The brothers need to tweak their resilience and how much energy they're putting in.
But again, it comes to recognition, though, because something we deem as being positive, that, boy, you should really put your efforts towards this, and you're really good at that. They're not getting the recognition they want. So it's not worth my effort. But again, it's not the recognition I want from the people I want.
So it seems like we have to change our toxic culture, and that would help improve certain behaviors.
It would, but that is, again, these are the hardest things to do. How do you change a culture? What do things mean to people? What do things symbolize for people? And that's really the hardest thing, which people do. It happens, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of trust, back to what we talked about earlier.
As a person on my own spiritual journey, I noticed that I'm at such a better place where it's like you're just open to your experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to mimic someone else's experience. I can't even explain it, because a person to say like, who do you worship? Like, I don't have a name, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I just go within myself and connect with the universe, and like that's what works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm starting to think maybe that's what people should be doing, bro, to be in a better
Some
space.
can't. Well, that's based on the individual too. Some people go through multiple conversions, and we all go through conversions anyway for various reasons. But in terms of religious and our spiritual lives, yeah, some people can convert one time. They get their community. They feel that this certain meaning system is sufficient for where they are in their lives, and that's it. They're Baptists when they're 25, and they'll be Baptists till they die. Other people is this constant searching for expanding meanings. And this ability to see things otherwise. One of the things about spirituality is not just, of course, is the relationship, the connections that it gives, but the ability for us to see things in a different way, to expand our meaning, helping us to reframe things in our environment. And different people need that constantly. That's why they're jumping from one denomination to the next, or one religion to the next, or one group to the next. They're always trying to find a different way of looking at things. And that's the same person who may be a musician. They're trying different genres. They're trying different instruments. They're always searching and finding. So it's individual by individual. And that can't be the case for everybody. And I think also it's good not to be judgmental of those persons who do find something that gives them meaning for their lives. And not be judgmental of those who we think, oh, they converted to something else again, or they're believing in this now. It's individual by individual, this constant searching that you can't create a model for that everybody can follow. It's individual by individual.
Yeah, because the book, again, anyone listening, I recommend God is Red. I forgot the author's name, but when I was in Africa, man, it really came full circle, because speaking to the people and understanding, a lot of Africans, I was in Ghana, right? And
You see how much Christianity is taking over?
Christianity there, but not even that, man. It's the fact that a lot of Ghanaians they don't refer to themselves as Ghanaian. They refer to their particular group of origin, right? Mm-hmm. And during colonialism, when you threw everyone in this land, I can see why it's the confusion, bro. Because not only is it the differences in language, cultural, and spiritual practice.
Everything.
You took people who have nothing to do with each other, bro.
Yeah.
And you put them under one umbrella.
And we're still trying to put this thing as we can be one.
And that makes no sense. That's the whole
it's too
thing.
Diverse. It's too diverse.
Like the Ganges here, he has the song Africa Unite. And I think what occurs a lot of times is that we don't want to accept new information. And we're working off someone's understanding that was 30 years ago or 50 or 100 years ago. Not understanding that, things evolve, you learn more. So, these certain ideas that we have aren't realistic because it was created with a limited amount of information.
This goes to your point about religion. It also creates during a different time where different things were going on.
Facts.
A lot of this Africa Unite stuff was going on during the colonization and the liberation of certain African countries. And people have this idea that some people, not all, will return back to Africa and be one people and so on and so forth. That's not a reality. It's too diverse. Take Ghana, for instance, so many different languages, so many things going on. It's too much.
To read stuff and experience, because I always read about the amount of different languages Selassie and cultures and religions Selassie had to deal with in Ethiopia. But to go there and talk to people and people on the
it's too diverse.
It's a lot going on over there.
It's too diverse. And this idea that, again, Africa Unite in terms of a political ideology is great, but in terms of lived experience is very difficult. So yeah, I think that's problematic in terms of spirituality and religion, but also I think it's good to know that if you are serious about learning about the past of African religions or African spirituality, it is so diverse and there's so much going on that for a certain type of person, the options are limitless in terms of what you could experience and what you could learn. So I think that's really great too.
And I do encourage people, because some people say yo, if I want to visit Africa or where do I look into? I was like, man, I just start anywhere, bro.
Did you go to the slave castles?
No, I didn't go. But here goes the joke. I was crying anyway without going to the slave classes.
Well, that's
so
a
if
whole.
I went to the slave classes, it would have been a snot bubble. So I had a lot going on. Because I was crying anyway because when I first got there, I said, yo, basically look like Jamaica, yeah.
When you went out the airport, I thought the same thing.
The same
confusion.
All right, so I say, yo.
The same confusion. I was like, what?
How the people outside?
Same thing, confusion. I landed at 11 o'clock at night and left the airport.
Away, right?
None but confusion was outside the airport. But this is gonna make you laugh. It was confusion. I didn't know where I was, but I had no fear whatsoever. I felt it was I was just asking.
I will say, man, it's just I don't know. I didn't realize how stressful it is being around white people, bro. Until I went. I'm serious. Cause I went days without seeing white people.
Yeah, and
even the whole cop thing and all that. It's just certain stresses here. You don't deal with. It's just nothing's perfect, but being around your own people, bro, is super chill. But. Yeah, the Jamaica vibe, but the reason, I don't know, man, it's just when I touched down the road and really took it in and say, yo, this thing wild, bro, dude's really in Africa, and it's
Wait, let me tell you something. So I suggest to anybody who has a chance, and again, I'm not going to turn this into the Hajj to the Mecca, something you have to do to be a part of the religion. If you get a chance, I think that anybody who has any desire to really know more about slavery and the origins of slavery or experience it firsthand, you have got to go to that Elmina Castle on the coast. That is the most one of the most unsettling experiences I've ever had. And it's weird, at least the way we took. You see the castle out in the distance, and it's very eerie seeing these castles, and you're driving up towards it. It was closed for a number of years. They reopened it as a museum. I forgot what year it was. And to me, I think that those grounds should be closed to the public because you're walking in the same slave dungeons.
Too much energy there, bro.
It's not even the energy, but it's the amount of people. Now, they say that the ground is several inches higher just because of how much decomposition has happened over the centuries with the dead bodies and so on and so forth in there. So they take you through all that, through the slave dungeons. You see the door of no return, which is, is about this dang wide. Yeah. And to think that these people who had to go through that system, go through that door. Not only I think about 3 out of 10 slaves that went through that slave castle survived because it was so filthy. And the disease, because they had people packed into a space,
up in the filth,
and all that, and people to death, and people dying in there, and all that. Okay, now that's terrible, right? So you have a couple of things about the Elmina Castle that are just very terrifying. The Portuguese built it. The Portuguese had a chapel built in the courtyard of the castle. When the Dutch took it over later, they built a chapel right on top of the dungeon. And going through all that and seeing the chapel and right over the dungeon, seeing where the person who oversaw the slave castle, he had a door right to where the women were kept, so he could go down there, take a woman when he wanted, and all that kind of stuff. That's very upsetting. The worst part of this castle, and people look this up online if you think this is some kind of fallacy or something. They had a dungeon, a special dungeon in the castle. And there was a skull with some bones. I didn't know what this was before the tour guide took us in there. They had a room in this castle for the rebellious slaves where they would put you in there. It was dark, very little light, but they would literally put you in there and let you rot away in isolation. No torture, no punishment, just let you sit there. And can you imagine that you get put in that room and you're left to die? For how weeks, months, we don't know how long it would take a person to die in there. And that was your punishment, right? And they had that room in that castle after somebody had already been captured in a slave dungeon. And that was their punishment before death. But hold on, let me tell you this. Now, you think of what kind of psychological lineage we're dealing with, where people who were taken from their homes, put in that castle, had to suffer in that castle. I'm talking about people who survived all this. So all people get put in this room, heard them screaming and doing whatever they did in that room, being tortured and wasting away. You go through that. You go through the door of no return. You go on the slave ship. You go on the slave ship. And the slave ship was now no comfortable ride, as we well know. You come across the middle passage. You end up on the plantation, right? You get sold off. Now you're on the plantation. Now, I'm not saying every plantation was torture and abuse, but some were. You experienced that, right? What kind of psychological legacy are you leaving after you're going through all of this?
Well, you know what's wild, man? Like, it's this big talk about epigenetics, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just, man, listen. First of all, personally, I can't even go to that castle, bro, because I couldn't, functionally. Because listen, I went to Whitney Plantation in New Orleans, bro.
I never went. Okay.
And I went there by myself, and it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a big old property, and they have an audio thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, bro. I just kind of
Have you been to the museum in DC yet?
No.
Even that, and that's really clean. No, the new one, the African American History Museum.
No, I've been to
and even that's very approachable. Yeah. But even they got the basement down there, brother, which is rough to get through.
Nah, but being on the plantation and they were showing some oil. I don't know if it was sugar cane or something. They had these big old bowls. They talking about people was falling into them, kids was falling into them, the housing. They had a metal box that's on my phone, bro. They used to put you out there in the sun. And it's just the thing I think about, we always talk about epigenetics. I bring it up. So it's that level of cruelty is still in the DNA of white people, bro.
And that level of trauma from experiencing it is still in our DNA.
And it's you have to work. I was talking to my wife about this. It's we talk about basic work, right? But there's a lot of work you have to do to get rid of that. I ain't talking about your childhood trauma fight. I'm talking about DNA trauma, because it's like it has to be there.
No, it's there.
The reason I brought up was this, yo. I was reading Black Jacobins again. I don't know why. Right. So I was reading it, and I was showing her a thing how basically it was saying how they was like cutting up people and feeding it to people to be a-holes, cutting up human parts, and if you didn't eat it, they would kill you. So I was telling her, I was like, yo, I used to see dudes beat people up when I was younger, right? And I wonder, were they triggered by a historical event, because the violence that they demonstrated didn't have no correlation with what occurred. So was it something triggered in their DNA from the past why they were so violent?
Okay. I think we have to recognize, and this is another conversation with people like that to be, for a certain part, or certain persons who were captured, the only way they found favor by the white captors was to be abusive towards blacks. There's always been this thing where, in order to be accepted by the culture, or to be or by those in power, you had to exhibit that you could be violent towards fellow black persons. So I think there's something in our DNA where we have not been, and this is still a problem, we don't know how to value black life ourselves. So the level of violence that you're talking about, again, it seems so disproportionate to whatever happened, is because there is something, I believe, that's in our cultural DNA.
No, it has to be, man.
Where we do not value black life. We've been taught that we shouldn't value black life.
But more than that, too, man, it's two sides, because it's also distilled in the psyche, somewhere in the DNA, to get that approval of whites, but to get approval of blacks. Because who do we praise?
No, people. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
That's the cool. The most brutal, violent person, depending on what neighbor you have, is the person that's prayed and talked about, especially in the Jamaican community. No one praises violence more than listen, you could be around Jamaican men, they gonna be like, yo, he a murderer, or he killed 20 people, or he chopped off a man head. And it's just like, yo, they're just telling you it's like this regular thing.
Yeah.
So it's definitely there, bro.
No, it's there. But I mean, all right, so, and I don't want to end this on a negative note in terms of what happened in terms of the castle, Middle Passage, and slavery. In spite of all of that,
the resilience,
you still had people who held on to hope. You still have people that try to hold on to community. You still have people that try to maintain some kind of spiritual life. Like, this is not it. There's some other whys there that we can connect ourselves to.
And I think we had this conversation with Professor James on epigenetics again. And we said it's so distorted, because when we do have the conversation, it's usually what we inherit that's negative. But we don't talk about what we inherit. We ignore the positive aspects, that resilience, that courage, that brilliance, that strategy.
And that determination, that resilience to where we will not let this community dissolve. That the community is worth saving.
We need to work on healing from the other stuff, but we need to tap into the other aspect that is there, bro.
Yes, which is a part of the African heritage, the religious heritage, the cultural heritage, things that we thought were completely disconnected during the Middle Passage, which I think, yes, we do have to try to reconnect with. But yeah, I mean, again, back to the initial thing, the castle and being on those grounds, I think is something that if people can. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, you must go to the castle, but if you're there and you can, I think it's worth the trip. It's traumatizing. It's horrible. But to think that one human being could do that to another human being over and over and over again is really makes you very, doesn't give you a lot of confidence about the human condition, what humanity is capable of.